The paradox of courage is that a man must be a little careless of his life, even in order to keep it. Quote by G.K. Chesterton. A tenant I was evicting threatened to take my life. This is my story.
Warning. This podcast features the truth about owning and operating mobile home parks. The following program is not designed to be sexy. It will not hype you up on MHPs. Rather, this is a raw take on this industry and how you find your own path to success. Welcome to MHP IRL, Mobile Home Parks in Real Life, with your host, Ryan Norris.
I want to start by saying that what I did was probably stupid. So don't try this at home. As I've mentioned before, my first real job out of college was selling cars. Each car sale is a slow and grudging process of tactfully easing tense confrontation to delivering the warm and fuzzy as your customer happily drives off the lot. It's an emotionally draining, psychological arm wrestling match in which the customer starts off ready for a fight, skeptical of everything you say, and has a huge upper hand because they could leave at any given moment for any reason. One slip up could cost you a sale. But in time, you slowly win their trust, allay their concerns, and de-escalate the tension. It's a brutal process for the salespeople because customers are unforgiving during the sales process and oftentimes get really ugly because you are subhuman to them. Otherwise, completely kind and normal people can become ruthless savages while buying a car. And they get away with this behavior because if they don't buy a car, you don't get paid. As you can imagine, after selling close to 900 cars in 4 years, I developed some thick skin and had become pretty efficient at de-escalating heated situations. This gave me the confidence, or maybe arrogance, to think I could handle a death threat. Part 1. The situation. It's a Thursday afternoon at about 5 p.m. in the last week of the month. In other words, it's a slow time of day during the slowest week of the month. We just took over the property about 30 days ago, so I'm prepping my new employees for rent week, as well as implementing our systems at our new property. Since essentially nothing tenant-wise has happened for the last few hours, and my flight home was early afternoon the next day, I sent my employees home a bit early so I could continue implementing systems without any distractions from employees or tenants. With the office locked and closed for business, I continued working. And then a tenant started loudly banging on the doors, screaming, "He's coming to kill you!" Annoyed, I tried to ignore it at first, as this sounds to me like normal rumor mill drama. I've heard countless unsubstantiated claims ranging from, "This guy's a child molester," to, "He's the biggest pill dealer in the county." So naturally, I figured this was just another outrageous accusation geared to serve this woman's ulterior motive. But as she persisted, her volume progressively increased. So I gave in and opened the door. I demanded, "If I find out you're lying, I'm kicking you out of my community." To which she replied, "I'm not, and you need to hear this." Reluctantly, I let her in and locked the door behind her. I am making a huge mistake, and I am encouraging this behavior, I thought to myself. She began, "The guy in lot blank comes over once a week, and we let him use our washer and dryer because he's fallen on hard times, and he started to get really weird, especially now that I guess you're evicting him. He says that he has a shotgun, and he's coming to kill everyone in the office tomorrow." Naturally, I replied, "I'm calling the police, so if this is true, I need you to wait for them to arrive so you can fill out a witness report and be willing to testify if this escalates." She complied. So we called the police. It was rush hour now, and since it was technically a non-emergency, we had to wait for about an hour for them to even show up. I still didn't believe her. So while waiting, I started digging up anything I could on this guy. We'll call him the killer. Luckily, the previous management had moved him in only about 45 days ago, so the information in his file was fresh. He had a full background check on him. He was in his mid-40s, and his only identification was a basic ID card from Wyoming. His proof of income was his own scribbles on a scrap piece of paper, and his background check yielded no helpful information with very limited credit history. The odd thing was, it was like this guy didn't exist until about 5 years ago. As the reality that maybe this is real started to set in, I thought through my own memory of interactions with this guy. He's a tall, stout, yet mild-mannered guy with desperation in his eyes. He seemed very weak, a beta male that would never hurt a fly. But the more I pieced together the puzzle, the scarier his behavior became. Had he been some tall, intimidatingly confident, towering figure, I'd say he's likely just trying to be a bully. Usually alpha male types get positive feedback over the years of bullying and become all bark but no bite types of people. But the killer was a beta with a history of losing, and those types can snap. Next, I spoke with some of the residents that knew him to see if I was alone in this assessment. Every single person said this guy was a ticking time bomb. When the police finally arrived, I shared with them everything I knew. Both the tenant and I filled out a report, but it was essentially worthless for us in that moment. You see, the police told us that no crime was committed since the threat wasn't made directly to me. Worse, this guy was a ghost in their system too, meaning with no active arrest warrants, and since he hadn't committed a crime, the police had no grounds to apprehend him. When I expressed how strange it was that this guy was a ghost for the first 35 plus years of his life, the police basically said there's a high likelihood this guy isn't who he says he is. So, with a credible threat, an understandably reactive, not proactive police force, and an eviction date set for weeks from now, what means did we have to protect ourselves? We'll take a pause now and I'll ask you, what would you have done in this situation? Part 2. The plan. The first thing that happens when you realize a real death threat, understandably, is you freeze in place. Chills run up and down your spine, and a cold sweat permeates through your skin. My life flashed before my eyes. I seriously asked myself if this was the end, and if I was happy with what I did in my life. I called my investor partners and explained the situation. They all recommended I get a hotel instead of staying on the property that night and heading to the airport the first thing the next day. But the killer didn't say, "I'm going to kill Ryan." He said, "I'm going to kill everyone in the office." And all my employees lived on the property. What would it say about me, a leader, if in this moment I chose to run away and leave everyone else in that danger? The second thing that happened to me was a bit more unexpected. Once I got through finding peace within myself, that I had lived a pretty fulfilling life, my mind did a 180. I got pissed. My blood boiled with anger. This is how it's going to end? Some loser getting evicted is going to end my life. No. I refuse to let this happen. Given my experience diffusing confrontational situations at the dealership, to my degree in psychology, to the resources I had at my disposal, I decided if anyone could fix this, it was me. That night, I gave myself a last meal. I went out by myself and got sushi, had a beer, watched some NFL, which is my favorite sport, talked to some of my best friends, and grabbed a Dairy Queen Blizzard on my way home. If I was going to die the next day, I wanted to enjoy some of my favorite things on this earth one last time. During this final outing, I constructed my plan. I realized two crucial things. One, he was about to have nothing, so he had nothing to lose. And two, I was the bad guy. I concluded that if I could change both of those factors, even just temporarily, I stood a chance to get him out of our property before he snapped. How was I going to do that? The next day, when he inevitably comes to the office, I'm going to put some money in his pocket so he isn't quite at rock bottom, and I'm going to convince him that I'm on his side and switch who the bad guy really was. If I could remove those two factors and offer him the money in exchange for him signing a document that sees if he's ever seen on the property again, he'd be arrested on site, we might stand a chance. Part 3. The execution. I chose to sleep on the property that night. I opted to decline the hotel because I wanted to show my employees who I was as a leader. I'm in this with you guys. I'm going to lead from the front and face the danger with you. To my surprise, I actually slept great that night. The killer only lived about 100 yards from me and had to know I was there as my rental car was parked outside. He could have busted down the door at any moment that night and I would have been a dead man. But strangely, coming to peace with the situation relaxed me through the night. That changed in the morning. I made the mistake of thinking I'd drive by his home, and if I didn't see him, then maybe he just left. Turns out, as I crept down his street in my rental car, he very much was home. He was standing in this big window with the shades pulled back, just staring at me while I drove by. His eyes were wide open, piercing right through me. And just like out of a horror film, he was standing there shirtless and possibly naked. One glance in his direction was all I needed to scare me into looking straight and not peeking anymore. That was one of the creepiest things I have ever encountered. When my employees got into the office, I caught them all up to speed. We had 2 maintenance workers and 2 office ladies, one transitioning out and one was her first day. I'm sure that was an unforgettable first day for her. To my surprise, everyone bought into my plan. All my employees were Latino, so I came to learn that they were used to self-policing in situations like this rather than involving the authorities. I told my maintenance guys to be ready at a moment's notice to drop everything and come to the office. When they got to the office, find a way to stay as close to him as possible without raising any suspicion and be prepared to just wait in the office until he leaves, even if that means we don't fix any homes today. I told the ladies to be calm, but call the police as soon as you have a moment to do so without raising any suspicion if things get out of hand. Not long after we opened, the killer showed up to the office wearing a big black backpack with only God knows what's inside of it. Ready or not, it was go time. Before he even had a chance to speak, I blurted out, "Oh, I've got some great news for you. Can you wait for me on the couch? I'll be right with you." That was strategic on my part. It bought me a few minutes to get the guys back to the office, get the women in place to make a call to the police if necessary, and it changed his mindset from whatever he had planned or was expecting to do to now he's waiting for some positive news. Once all 5 of us were in place, I sat down next to the killer on the couch. and I began. The next 45 minutes consisted of me firmly repeating myself, him talking in circles, and a lot of fruitless back and forth. It takes a lot of character in these moments not to call someone out on obvious lies, inconsistencies, and pleas clearly geared to him buying more time on the property. For example, him saying, "But what if I want to come back and visit my friends here?" simply translates to, "I'm planning on moving in with them." It's difficult to hear something like that and separate the humanity from what ultimately is just a ploy to manipulate. One trait common in serial killers is their charisma and ability to connect with people. Truth is, this guy was just plain dangerous and needed out permanently. If I succumb to the temptation of arguing with him, like in a car deal, I risk losing the sale and possibly finding out what's in that ominous backpack of his. Everyone, myself included, was relying on me to keep my composure and keep the situation calm, yet communicate that he was unwelcome. To achieve this, I had to bite my tongue and firmly repeat that in exchange for this check I'm going to write you, you will sign this document that says you relinquish your rights to this home, as well as agree to never set foot on this property again. Otherwise, we reserve the right to arrest you for criminal trespassing. I've mentioned in the past that the only way to deal with delusions and irrationality is to be firm and repetitive. That, plus time, and me taking it away from him eventually sealed the deal. I said, "I can continue with the eviction and not give you this money. Is that what you would prefer?" He oscillated in place for a few moments and then finally fell into my frame. "Well, no, I'm taking the money and I agree to your terms." The killer signed our document, took the check, and gradually meandered his way out of the office and down the street. I never saw him again. I flew back Monday morning, arriving in the office slightly before noon. It hadn't been 5 minutes back in the office when our new employee waved me over to look at something. It was the killer's mugshot. He was arrested within 24 hours of our ordeal. He had snapped, but no one on our property got hurt, and to this day, he hasn't been back to our knowledge. Folks often ask me if I would have done anything differently, like, would I maybe have not paid him or just called the police right when he showed up to the office? My answer is always that, look, whatever we did, because it was a team effort, worked. Was it reckless? Absolutely. But all 4 employees consented and understood the risks and wanted to help keep the community safe. The truth is that this event occurred a while ago, and I've been reluctant to share this story on this podcast out of fear that folks would think I'm just another braggadocious, self-promotional podcaster or that I'm trying to scare people away from investing in mobile home parks. But I ultimately decided to release this episode because I realized the point of this podcast is to offer you a different perspective on this industry. Now, while this episode isn't designed to scare you away from investing in mobile home parks, it is designed to scare you into doing your research. You see, I didn't. I read the materials, networked with a few folks, listened to some podcasts, and thought I understood this cool, lucrative, yet passive niche. Like I mentioned prior, my own assumptions based on the information I gathered were very wrong, and fortunately, I was pleasantly surprised to find that my skill sets and passions matched this industry. But you've heard me say that before. What you haven't heard me say before is that I think you should get into mobile home parks. Why? Because you can make a difference. You can improve largely ignored properties in a way that's rewarding for both yourself and your tenants and your employees. What happened to me was very rare and super unlucky. Don't let it discourage you or convince you that this happens all the time. I've spoken with folks with decades of experience in this industry, and almost across the board, very few have stories like mine. But at the same time, I hope that me sharing this story with you helps you realize that what you're signing up for is very real. And you might be thrusting someone else into a dangerous situation that you created. And for that reason, that your decisions might affect the safety and livelihood of others, is why I decided ultimately to share this story with you. However unlikely they may be, when bad things do inevitably happen, are you going to hide behind a desk or confront the problem face to face? Would having my due diligence list help you? If so, I will let you have it for free. That's right. My list that took me 3 years to develop and includes plenty of fixes for mistakes that I made that now you can avoid. All absolutely free. All I ask for in exchange is leave me a 5-star review and a comment. Screenshot your comment after it goes live and email it to me at my website, archimedesgrp.com. Afterwards, let's connect. This episode was inspired by a listener just like you. Even if you don't have any ideas for future episodes, let's still connect, as I'm sure there are ways you and I can help each other out. I'm looking forward to chatting soon.